Hey everybody, Brandon here. Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be covering another game from the Canadian Open 2022. It is round number 7 now, and I am on a -1 score. I won my last game. My opponent dropped a piece in a very unusual way, but now I'm trying to even my score. I'm playing against, again, Irene, who is about 450 points lower rated, so I'm really hoping that I can win this one because then I'll be even score in the event. And Canadian Open, it's the Canadian Open. As a Canadian, I want to do the best I can, so I want to get at least an even score in my first time playing. So hopefully I can win. Let's see how it goes. Let's get into it. I'm playing with the white pieces. I play e4. I'm done with d4. I'm just done. After my last d4 game and losing like that against someone much lower rated, I realized I do not have the skill set to work with d4 openings at the level of like playing classical games. In my view, there were positions I were unfamiliar and uncomfortable with, and I decided just to go back to e4. And after d6, the Philidor. Okay, I go to d4. Okay, now I'm playing a d4 opening, I guess. Like, what else do I do? So we actually transpose into a King's Indian. Who would have thought? But okay, we got a King's Indian now, and this is fine for me. Although it's d4, this is one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to switch to d4, because I loved playing the King's Indian against it, like as white, because I played it a lot as black and I struggled with it a ton, and I felt like white was always getting the upper hand there. All right, so I played knight f3, which is the classical types of the King's Indian. You can also play like f3, which is the same-ish. H3 I think is the Makaganov. There's a ton of different things that can be played. I just played knight f3, bishop g4. And I was a little bit surprised to see this move, actually, because bishop g4, if one plays the King's Indian, if anyone here watching this video plays the King's Indian or wants to learn more about it, one thing that you might know is generally this bishop should not really be developed. More specifically, it can be developed, but you want to keep it. And making a trade like bishop g4 takes on f3 isn't really the right approach here. Instead, what you might see is castles, bishop e2, e5, knight c6. Castles, knight c6, d5, knight e7. And this bishop, as we can see, starts to play a big role because black's ideas here are to play f5, g5, g4 after the move f3 has been played. And create breaks on the king side. And even if we play h3, sometimes the bishop just sacrifices and is like the best piece like on the board. The light square bishop is a surprisingly important piece for the King's Indian, despite it almost never developing, unless it's just to like d7. So bishop g4 is not really the most intuitive way to play. Now this is fine, because as long as my opponent does not transpose into a King's Indian, then it's not the worst thing ever. But this is kind of how King's Indian structures tend to look, and generally they'll turn out like that. They can go for a Benoni with c5, and then it actually makes sense that they traded, but we'll have to see how things go. I played h3. They took on f3. I was happy to see this, generally happy to get the bishop pair in the opening. And again, generally somewhat expecting some sort of c5s at some point. But we don't. We see knight c6. I played bishop e3. I wasn't really interested in playing d5 and going into anything like this. I didn't see the point. Played bishop e3. My opponent played e5. And then I played d5, expecting knight d4, because knight d4, this is just going to be completely even. What we'll see here is queen d1, c5 takes, pawn takes, bishop d3. This is equal. The knight on d4, even if they lost the pawn, it offers pretty good compensation because we'd have to get rid of our dark square bishop for that, and in turn open up their dark square bishop in return. So not really great. But they blundered here. And this is actually just a full blunder. Knight e7. Now it's a King's Indian, but it's a bad one. And that's very important to remember, that this is a bad King's Indian. Because after Knight e7, we're just going to play a normal one, the Rook c1. White's idea in the King's Indian is to go for c5. I'm planning c5 here with Rook c1. Knight d7. Queen d1, just going back. f5, f3, f4, bishop f2. I'm happy to go down this entire line. And here again, we could see if they had a light square bishop, it makes a big difference. g5, h5, g4, even sacrificing on h3 if we castle short makes a lot of sense. But it's just not possible without it. Knight g8, b4, going for c5 as mentioned. a5, I'm happy to see this because I'm trying to expand on the queen side. And again, for King's Indian players, just look at the structure, right? Where is black facing? Where is white facing? When we look at the furthest advanced pawn closest to the center, and then same thing for white, d5 is the furthest advanced pawn, and this chain is facing the queen side. Their chain is facing the king side here. So we should be attacking on queen side. They should be attacking on king side. Because that's where the most space is. That's the reason why we do this, is when we see this pawn on f4, we realize that black has more space on this side of the board, the king side. But when we have the pawn on d5 and we have this structure, we have more space on the queen side and even in the center as well. So a5 actually just benefits us here because a3, this just opens more lines for us. Even though it does develop their rook, it doesn't matter. Then they play knight b6, which doesn't help their cause. I could take and then play something like knight b5. I don't see a reason to when we can play c5 with tempo. Knight to c8 here. And then knight b5. I don't want to take on d6 quite yet because I don't want to see like knight takes d6, so I just focus on further attacking. I could have played like bishop e2 or bishop d3 and then castled here, but I thought knight b5 was more critical. We see c6. I take on c6 first, just once, and then I take on d6. And now, yeah, this is much more clear that this is totally winning. It is an extra pawn at this point. And let's see how the game continues. So queen d7. Bishop c4, knight f6, castles, finally. Bishop f8 to attack the pawn. And there's this funny little maneuver that we have to keep it. I do not care about b4. That's important to remember. If we have to choose between one of the pawns, if we could permanently keep one and have them never touch one of them, we want to keep d6. d6 is like a bone in their throat. Like they can't move easily with the d6 pawn in the way. So what we do here is we play bishop c5, and then rook d8, but how do we keep the pawn? Well, we play bishop b6, actually, and the point is we're taking on d8 if they take on d6, so they don't have time. If we play any other move, sure, this is probably good for us. There's no doubt about it. I think like, computer gave this, and then like queen d2. Sure, we're better here, but there was a lot more that we could have gotten, and bishop b6 offers a lot more. Let's put it like that. Rook b8 and bishop c7, so this is how we lose b4, but it doesn't matter. After rook takes b4, queen d2, developing further, and the problem is if they want to do anything with their king, like castle it at all, first off, it's hard to castle because our bishop is really strong. But they have to move their bishop in order to move their king. But in order to move their bishop, they have to move it to like h6 and then go king f8 to g7. Their king is just perpetually never safe. And this is why this variation is just so hard to deal with already. Rook b7 was played. Rook fd1. Just want to avoid any tactics. It's easy, like bishop a2 or something would be sad because then they can take. But even still, I think this is fine for us because we just promote anyways. So I don't even think it matters. But I played rook fd1. No reason to allow rook takes c7, queen takes d2 complications. It's easy to mess those up. And then after rook f to d1, yeah, I have ideas of queen a2 and bishop e6, as we can see. And I also have ideas of queen a8 check, just winning the rook. So they play rook a7, but this doesn't help because queen b2 also threatens the rook. And it also threatens e5. Black ends up taking on c7. I took on e5 with check. Bishop e7, and then I took on c7, and my opponent resigned here. Because queen c8, I immediately just win the queen with rook d8 check. And after queen takes, it's actually more than just the queen for the rook here. It's also the other rook in the corner. Because we have queen b8 check, and there's no way to defend the rook. And they kind of have to go into that, because here, if we look, when we take, there's no king f7 or anything, and there's no bishop takes. So that's really important to notice. That queen b8 here will win. So that was the game. I was a bit happier. It was a bit of a spirit raiser for this one, because the last game I played that I won didn't really feel like I deserved to win it. I had a worse position out of the opening, and there was definitely more challenging ways to play, and I kind of just got lucky at the end. At least this one felt like I deserved to win the game. It felt clean from start to finish here. So that covers it for game number 7. I will see you guys in game number 8 of the Canadian Open. I'm finally already on an even score, which is nice. Now we have 2 more. Let's see how I can do. See you in game 8. Bye-bye.